100 is a nice round number, isn't it? It's a century in cricket, a decisive break in snooker. And do you remember the good old days when £100 in your pocket was a lot of money before inflation kicked in? And by recent standards, remaining Prime Minister and actually staying at number 10 for 100 days is a bloody miracle. Sunak hardly got off to the best possible start, inheriting a pound in freefall, an energy crisis and a probable recession. And he wasn't even elected by his own grassroots, so not exactly the strongest mandate for power either. But he hit the ground running with swift action to reassure the international financial markets about the bankability of the United Kingdom, which has settled nerves among the Rolex-wearing financiers upon whose largesse we are now sadly reliant. It's now significantly cheaper for Britain to borrow money because we are once again trusted as a reasonably safe bet internationally. And Sunak's obsession with inflation will likely bear fruit later this year and into 2024. With falling prices and a boost in the value of the pound in your pocket and your wage packet, things should be sunnier as the year goes on. It's clear that the highest tax burden since the war, a political choice, will add to our economic woes. We might avoid recession if we cut taxes and go for the Liz Truss route. Strong argument for that, particularly corporation tax. But Sunak begs to differ. He's made a judgment that tackling inflation is the only show in town. Everything else is mere detail. Now, this has been and will be the biggest call of his premiership so far. But if it's the right call, then Mrs. Sunak can start looking at new wallpaper for number 10. The Nadeem Zahawi tax scandal is a very bad look, to say the least. But once he had proof that the ministerial code was broken, Sunak again acted swiftly. Don't forget, Boris Johnson found it impossible to fire cabinet ministers and advisers, like Dominic Cummings and his ill-fated trip to Barnard Castle. Do you remember? He was testing his eyesight. He didn't get the sack. What about the disastrous Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson? Stayed in post far too long. And of course, Boris didn't even sack Matt Hancock when captured on CCTV having a snog fest during lockdown, breaking every rule you can think of. It's my view that when it comes to the strikes, the woke takeover of our society, the energy crisis and illegal migrant crossings, the alternative to Rishi Sunak, the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, hasn't got a leg to stand on. Or a cervix. With half the country effectively on strike yesterday, Starmer didn't even bring it up at Prime Minister's questions. Clear proof, if you needed it, that he is in the pocket of the unions. Now, today's news of a hike in interest rates is more bad news and an awful start to the year. Credit cards, loans, mortgages will all go up. But keep the faith. The tunnel is at its darkest before you reach the end. Perhaps fueled by Brexit derangement syndrome, in which the political and media elite will try to blame everything on our departure from the EU, Britain, in my view, has been a victim of huge pessimism when it comes to our post-pandemic outlook. Look no further than the surprise news that the economy grew in November by a small amount, I'll grant you, but more than the contraction that was predicted. And more news today that, in fact, we avoided recession altogether at the end of last year, and a shallower downturn is anticipated for 2023. So the mood music defies the critics. There are two key questions after 100 days of Rishi Sunak. The first one is about his political judgment. Well, by identifying the 5 key things that arguably matter most to the British people, I think he passes that test. He has promised, yes, promised, to tackle NHS waiting lists, to grow the economy, to reduce the debt, to halve inflation and to stop the boats. If Carlsberg did shopping lists, that one would surely qualify. Sunak knows what he's got to do, and he's got 2 years in which to make some serious inroads. The next question is about his character. Does he have the backbone to see this through? A zero-tolerance policy towards illegal migrant crossings will take legal and political courage. Cutting the debt will see Britain having to live within its means. Sunak will be fighting against powerful vested interests. Fixing the NHS will require bold and painful reform. And halving inflation will involve the mother of all fights with the trade unions as he pushes back on their inflation-busting demands. The strikes are a nightmare for Sunak, but they are an opportunity too, and could prove to be his Thatcher moment. In 2 years' time, with a choice of Prime Minister Sunak versus Prime Minister Starmer, I believe it's all to play for. Far from fearing the next election, if Rishi Sunak delivers on his 5-point plan, that election can't calm Sunak enough. 100 days could become 1,000.